Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In the intricate dance of global commerce, few companies cast a shadow as long as Apple. But today, on September 16, 2025, that finely tuned machine is grinding to a halt. The world is watching as Apple finds itself at the epicenter of an unprecedented trade earthquake, sparked by a sudden and aggressive tariff war that threatens to redraw the map of the global technology industry. This is more than a corporate crisis, it's a high-stakes geopolitical drama, with decisions made in the coming weeks set to shape the future of global trade and the very architecture of the 21st century economy. The news sent shockwaves through financial markets from Wall Street to Shanghai. On April 9, 2025, China and India imposed a 100% import duty on all iPhones, doubling their price overnight in two of Apple's largest markets. Suddenly, Apple's products were at risk of being priced out of markets fundamental to its existence. Stock markets shuddered as investors scrambled to assess the damage. The crisis exposed Apple's greatest vulnerability, its deep reliance on a globalized supply chain, now weaponized against it. The events of April laid bare how quickly political winds can leave even the most powerful corporations exposed. Apple now faces a desperate race to rethink its business model as the world watches to see if this global giant can weather the storm. To grasp Apple's crisis, we must look back at its decades-long bet on Asia, especially China. China became Apple's global factory, assembling 90% of iPhones and dominating its supply chain. Recognizing the risks, Apple began diversifying to India, aiming for 20% of iPhones to be made there by year's end. But building up India's infrastructure takes years, not months. The new tariffs turned Apple's gradual shift into an urgent scramble, dismantling its design in America, build in Asia model. The intricate web of suppliers that was once Apple's greatest asset became its biggest liability overnight. Apple's strategy, which defined an era of globalization, now left it cornered by the very forces it once harnessed. The first week of April 2025 marked a turning point in history, as the simmering Cold War of trade between global superpowers finally erupted into open conflict. What had once been a battle of words and warnings now became a clash of economic titans, with the world watching in disbelief as the rules of international commerce were rewritten overnight. The Trump administration stunned markets by announcing sweeping tariffs targeting Apple's vast Asian manufacturing network. Tariffs soared as high as 104% on Chinese goods, with similarly punishing rates imposed on imports from Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand. The move sent shockwaves through the global supply chain, threatening to upend decades of carefully built partnerships and logistics. In a matter of days, China and India struck back, imposing 100% tariffs on iPhones and other American electronics. The result was immediate and devastating. Demand for Apple products in these crucial markets collapsed, leaving store shelves empty and consumers searching for alternatives. Within a single week, the global trade landscape was redrawn. Long-standing alliances fractured, new trade blocs emerged, and companies like Apple found themselves caught in a whirlwind of political retribution and economic uncertainty. The tariffs were not just numbers on a spreadsheet, they were weapons, carefully aimed to inflict maximum pain on the supply chains that had made Apple a symbol of global success. Factories slowed, shipments stalled, and workers faced an uncertain future as the gears of international commerce ground to a halt. The era of globalization that defined the post-Cold War world was suddenly under siege. Protectionism and tit-for-tat penalties replaced the open borders and free trade agreements that had fueled decades of growth. The world was witnessing the rapid unraveling of a system once thought unbreakable. Apple, once celebrated as a bridge between cultures and economies, now found itself navigating a minefield of geopolitical hostilities. Its iconic products, once symbols of innovation and connection, had become pawns in a high-stakes game of international brinkmanship. The shockwaves from this trade war are shaking the very foundations of the global technology sector. As uncertainty spreads, companies and consumers alike are left to wonder, what will the new world order look like, and who will emerge from the chaos stronger or weaker than before? With crippling tariffs on Chinese-made goods, the global tech supply chain was thrown into chaos. For years, China had been the undisputed manufacturing powerhouse, but now, companies were scrambling to adapt. The US government's aggressive trade policies forced multinational giants to rethink their strategies almost overnight. Apple's pivot to India became an urgent operational imperative. No longer just a backup plan, India was suddenly at the center of Apple's global ambitions. Executives flew in, forging new partnerships and negotiating with local authorities to ramp up production at breakneck speed. Between March and May 2025, Foxconn exported $3.2 billion worth of iPhones from India, a staggering figure that signaled a new era for both Apple and the Indian manufacturing sector. With 97% of those iPhones shipped directly to the US, it marked a seismic shift from the previous year's supply routes. India was no longer just a minor player, it was now a critical link in Apple's global chain. Tata Electronics followed suit, dramatically increasing US-bound shipments. Indian factories buzzed with activity as workers raced to meet surging demand and new export targets. Apple chartered entire fleets of aircraft to fly billions in iPhones from India to the US, transforming Indian airports into round-the-clock export hubs. The logistical challenge was immense, but the stakes were even higher. Meanwhile, Apple lobbied Indian authorities to slash customs clearance times, pushing for faster approvals and streamlined paperwork to keep shipments moving without delay. This great pivot to India is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it allows Apple to bypass US tariffs on China, giving the company a crucial lifeline. But on the other, it doesn't solve the 100% retaliatory tariffs in India and China, leaving Apple caught in the crossfire of a global trade war. The geopolitical tensions between India and China add another layer of complexity, as both countries impose steep tariffs and tighten regulations. President Trump's response was blunt and unmistakable. "We want you to build here." The message to Apple and other tech giants was clear: bring jobs and manufacturing back to American soil, or face even more pressure. Apple's agility is on display as the company adapts to shifting global realities and reimagines its supply chain in real time. But so is its desperation, as executives scramble to keep up with changing regulations, mounting costs, and the ever-present threat of disruption. As India becomes the new center of the tech supply chain and the eye of a growing geopolitical storm, the world watches to see if this bold gamble will pay off or if new challenges will force yet another dramatic shift. The colossal costs of this trade war will ultimately be paid by consumers. The era of the sub-$1,000 iPhone is over. Tariffs and logistical chaos are set to send prices soaring. In China and India, iPhones are now prohibitively expensive, halving Apple's potential sales overnight. Apple's scramble to reconfigure its supply chain adds massive costs, all passed on to buyers. Industry experts warn that a fully American-made iPhone could cost $3,500 or more. The globalized system kept prices down. Its dismantling exposes the true cost of our technology. The next iPhone launch may be defined not by features, but by a price tag reflecting a fractured, expensive new reality. Experts agree. There are no easy solutions for Apple. Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities warns the financial consequences are mind-boggling. The idea of moving all production to the US is seen as fantasy. Building the necessary workforce and infrastructure would take decades and astronomical investment. Some estimates put the price of a US-made iPhone at $30,000 or more. Counterpoint research projects made in India iPhones will account for up to 30% of global shipments in 2025, up from 18% in 2024. This shift highlights Apple's agility but also the immense pressure on India's manufacturing ecosystem. Apple is caught between political demands to onshore and economic realities that make it nearly impossible. Apple's crisis ripples far beyond Cupertino, sending shockwaves through the global economy and the very fabric of the technology sector. What began as a challenge for one of the world's most valuable companies is now a pivotal moment for industries and communities across continents. The uncertainty surrounding Apple threatens the health of the global tech sector and economies worldwide, shaking investor confidence and causing market volatility that affects millions of people, from Wall Street to small investors. Hundreds of suppliers, from chip makers in Taiwan who produce the brains of our devices, to glass manufacturers in the US who craft the sleek exteriors, now face a future clouded by uncertainty as Apple reroutes or cancels orders. Factories that once ran around the clock are pausing production, and workers worry about their livelihoods as supply chains are thrown into disarray. The disruption is accelerating a chaotic reshuffling of global production, forcing companies to rethink where and how they build the world's most popular gadgets. As manufacturing shifts, new winners and losers emerge across Southeast Asia, with countries like Vietnam and Thailand seeing a surge in investment while others struggle to adapt. The use of Apple as a proxy in a trade war marks a dangerous escalation in international relations, turning a business dispute into a geopolitical standoff that could have lasting consequences. Trust between nations is eroding, and the world risks splintering into fragmented economic blocs, each with its own rules and barriers, making global cooperation more difficult than ever. For consumers, the long-term impact could be a slowdown in innovation, with fewer new products on store shelves and higher prices for the devices we rely on every day. As companies divert resources from research and development to managing tariffs, compliance and logistics, the pace of technological progress slows, and the next big breakthrough may be delayed. Billions that could have fueled the next generation of technology, from artificial intelligence to green energy, are now spent on crisis management and navigating an increasingly complex global landscape. Boardrooms are consumed by emergency meetings, as executives scramble to adapt strategies and protect their companies from the fallout. The ripple effect touches everything from high-stakes diplomacy and international negotiations to the features and capabilities on your next smartphone, as companies weigh what's possible against what's practical in a fractured world. In the end, the consequences of Apple's crisis may fundamentally alter our technological future, shaping not just what we buy, but how we live, work, and connect in a rapidly changing world. As this crisis unfolds, Apple and the global tech industry face a future of frantic adaptation and uncertainty. Apple's pivot to India is a short-term fix. The 100% retaliatory tariffs in China and India remain crippling. The next earnings report will reveal the true cost of this trade war. The resolution lies in diplomacy, not boardrooms. Will world leaders step back from the brink, or double down on protectionism? This crisis ends an era of complacency, forcing companies and governments to rethink the balance between efficiency and resilience. The saga of Apple's tariff crisis is a defining moment, raising fundamental questions about the world we want, open markets or digital fortresses. The simple act of making and selling an iPhone is now a complex geopolitical statement, and its future will shape the world to come.